Rachel Whitmore never imagined she'd be in this position, alone, in a small cabin in Montana, far from the people who were supposed to be her family. The air was crisp, the days cold and quiet, but it was the peace she had craved for years. As she sipped her morning tea, Rachel couldn't help but remember the phone call that had shattered everything. It was supposed to be a simple question. "Are you flying in for Haley's wedding?" Her cousin's casual tone made Rachel freeze. She had no idea. The wedding that Haley, her baby sister, had planned for months, without ever mentioning her. The one she wasn't invited to. Rachel had always been the one who cared. Who fixed things. But now, as she sat in this remote place, she realized her family had forgotten her, and maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to forget them too. Growing up in the Whitmore family, Rachel had always been the one who held everything together. When their father passed away when she was still young, Rachel took on the role of protector and provider for her younger sister, Haley. She was the one who helped Haley navigate high school, paid her bills when she couldn't remember due dates, and even sent her care packages during college, always there, always supportive, without asking for anything in return. Her mother, Margaret, was distant, absorbed in her own life, and rarely took the time to truly see her children. Rachel had grown used to being the quiet one, the one who did everything for others without ever being noticed. It wasn't that Margaret didn't love her, it was just that Rachel's love was expected, while Haley's was celebrated. It wasn't just Margaret. Haley, too, never seemed to realize how much Rachel had done for her. There was no gratitude. No acknowledgement. It was as if Rachel was simply a background character in Haley's life, a constant but invisible force in the background, while Haley took the spotlight. And yet, Rachel didn't mind. Or so she told herself. She had always believed that if she worked hard enough, if she gave enough of herself, one day Haley would see. Maybe one day, Haley would understand. But that day never came. The years went by, and while Rachel became more successful in her career, an independent, self-sufficient woman, she never quite felt seen. It was as if she was trapped in a never-ending cycle of self-sacrifice, of giving everything and receiving nothing in return. The family never noticed when she was struggling or when she needed help. And when it came to emotional support, Rachel realized she had become the constant caregiver, but no one else had ever cared enough to return the favor. So, Rachel pushed forward. She built her life, kept her distance from her family's drama, and worked hard to achieve the success that Haley and their mother never gave her credit for. But it was becoming clear, the more Rachel gave, the less she mattered. It wasn't until she found out about the wedding, the one she wasn't invited to, that the truth finally sank in. She had been cast aside. Not just forgotten, but intentionally excluded. The family didn't need her anymore. Haley had moved on, and Rachel was no longer a part of her future. As the days passed, Rachel felt something shift inside her. The pain of being overlooked and ignored was still there, but now, there was also a quiet, growing realization. Maybe it was time for Rachel to stop trying. Maybe it was time to let go of the family she had sacrificed so much for. She didn't have to keep fighting for their approval. They didn't want her there. And she didn't need them. The moment Rachel found out she wasn't invited to Haley's wedding, everything around her seemed to fall into a surreal silence. It wasn't that she had expected an invitation, after all, her family had made it clear for years that she wasn't a priority. But this was different. This was the final straw, the moment that exposed the painful truth that she had been invisible for so long. The news came unexpectedly. Jenny, her cousin, had casually asked if Rachel was flying in for the wedding. It was a simple question, but the impact was devastating. What wedding? Rachel had asked, trying to mask the sinking feeling in her chest. Jenny's response came like a blow. "Oh, Haley's wedding. Didn't you know?" Rachel stood frozen, her mind racing. How could Haley, her little sister, the girl she had raised after their father's death, do this? How could she plan one of the biggest events of her life without even thinking to invite Rachel? There had been no explanation, no apology. Just silence. The kind of silence that spoke louder than any words. She excused herself, stepping outside to her car. The heat of the summer day seemed unbearable, but it wasn't the sun making her feel suffocated, it was the feeling of betrayal that seemed to close in on her. Rachel sat in her car, staring out the window, struggling to breathe. She wasn't angry, at least not yet. She wasn't sure what she felt. All she knew was that she had been left out, again. Inside the house, life went on as if nothing had happened. Rachel could see her mother, Margaret, chatting with Jenny, casually discussing the wedding plans. There was laughter, there was comfort. But for Rachel, there was only the gnawing emptiness of being erased from the family's big moment. She couldn't stay. She couldn't pretend it didn't hurt, couldn't force herself to smile through the pain. Rachel didn't even wait for Haley to acknowledge her absence. She knew, deep down, Haley wouldn't even notice. The family had chosen to leave her out, and Rachel had no intention of chasing after them for scraps of affection. A few days passed before she finally called her mother. It wasn't out of anger, not at first. It was more like a need to hear the words that would make this real. Rachel just wanted to know if her mother would finally admit it, that they had all planned this without her. "Hi, honey," Margaret's voice came through the phone, warm and distant, the way it always did when she spoke to store clerks or anyone else she had to manage. "Everything okay?" "I just have a quick question," Rachel said, trying to keep her voice light. "Is Haley getting married?" A long pause. Then, the sound of a refrigerator door shutting. "Yes, next month, actually. We didn't know if you'd be free." Rachel's heart sank. "I didn't know it was happening." Margaret's voice was calm, almost too calm. Haley really wanted something small, just family. Rachel could hear the words clearly, but it didn't matter. What Margaret didn't understand was that Rachel wasn't just being excluded, she was being erased, and it hurt more than she could express. Haley wanted something small, just family. The words echoed in her mind as she sat in her car, staring at the phone. She had spent years being there for her sister. Years of sacrifices, of being the one who always made things right. And now, she wasn't even considered part of the family anymore. Rachel could feel the sting in her chest, but she didn't say anything. She just hung up. It was clear, her family had made their choice. And Rachel had made hers too. She wasn't going to fight for a seat at the table anymore. She wasn't going to beg for a place in their lives. The last part of her that cared was fading away. And in its place, a new, unspoken truth was emerging: she didn't need them. Rachel didn't call her mother right away. The sting of being left out was still too raw, and honestly, she wasn't sure if she wanted to hear her mother's half-hearted explanations. But over the next few days, the silence gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something deep inside her had shifted. It wasn't just about the wedding, or the snub, it was the realization that for years, she had been fighting to be seen by people who simply didn't care enough to see her. The phone call to her mother came after a long night of thinking. She didn't call out of anger. She wasn't ready to yell or demand answers. This wasn't about getting her family's validation anymore, it was about understanding something she had been too afraid to admit. She wasn't angry, she was just tired. When Margaret answered, her voice was as calm and collected as ever. It was the same voice she used with strangers, with her coworkers, with everyone except her own children. "Hi, honey. Everything all right?" Margaret asked, her tone almost mechanical, as if nothing had changed. As if Rachel were still the same daughter who would drop everything to help, no questions asked. Rachel almost laughed at how predictable it all was. Her mother was still trying to act as if nothing was wrong, as if she hadn't just been excluded from her own sister's wedding. As if she hadn't just been erased from the family's plans altogether. "I just have a quick question," Rachel said, trying to keep her tone light, but it felt hollow, like she was playing a role she wasn't sure she wanted to be in anymore. "Is Haley getting married?" The pause on the other end of the line lasted long enough for Rachel to hear the click of a refrigerator door closing. Margaret sighed, the kind of sigh that only came when she was pretending to be calm but was, in fact, trying to find the right words to justify the unjustifiable. "Yes, next month, actually. We didn't know if you'd be free." Rachel's heart dropped into her stomach. "I didn't know it was happening," she responded, almost in disbelief. She wasn't surprised, not really, but it still hit her with the force of a wave. How could her family have gone through with all of this without even mentioning it to her? How could they pretend that she wasn't a part of this momentous occasion in Haley's life? Her mother's next words stung in a way Rachel hadn't expected. Haley really wanted something small, just family. Rachel closed her eyes, her mind racing. Just family? Her hands gripped the phone tighter as if she could hold on to some shred of the connection she once had with her family. "So, you just forgot to mention it to me?" Margaret's voice softened, and Rachel could hear the defensive tone creep in. "You know how these things are. Haley didn't want it to be a big thing. And with all the wedding planning, things got a little complicated. Complicated. That word was always used when they didn't know how to explain why Rachel was the one who was always left behind. "I'm not angry, Mom," Rachel said, almost to herself. She wasn't angry anymore, she was done. "I just wish you would have told me the truth, instead of treating me like I didn't matter." There was a long silence. Her mother didn't apologize. She didn't try to make things better. Instead, Margaret simply changed the subject, her voice suddenly cold. "You're not mad, are you?" Rachel didn't answer. She didn't need to. She didn't call Haley to confront her either. The truth was, Rachel didn't need to fight for a place at that table anymore. She didn't need to beg anyone to include her, to make room for her. She had given enough. She had given for years, and the more she gave, the less they noticed. It was time to stop. Rachel didn't make a scene. She didn't shout. She simply left. The wedding wasn't about her, it never had been. It was about Haley, about the family, and about what they had all chosen for themselves. It wasn't her choice. And for the first time, she realized it wasn't her fight anymore. She hung up the phone, put it down, and stood up. There was no more anger. There was just the quiet realization that she had to walk away, not because they had pushed her out, but because she had finally realized she deserved better. The days passed after Rachel's decision to leave everything behind, and with them came an eerie quiet. Montana was a place that demanded silence. The landscape was wide, cold, and vast, a stark contrast to the suffocating chaos of her family's drama. Rachel was determined to keep her distance from the mess she had just walked away from, but no matter how much she tried to forget, the family's story was always a step behind her. Then, it came, a message. Rachel's phone buzzed on a quiet morning, breaking the stillness. It was from her best friend Julia, the one person who had always understood her, who had never expected Rachel to be anything other than who she was. Julia's message was short and to the point, "You need to see this." The link she sent led to a TikTok video. Rachel hesitated, staring at the thumbnail. It showed a reception hall, people milling around. She clicked it anyway. The moment the video began, Rachel knew something was wrong. It started mid-chaos. Shouting. The sound of a glass shattering. The camera panned across the room, capturing frantic movement. Then, a voice broke through the noise, a voice Rachel recognized, her sister Haley's maid of honor, Rachel's old friend Brooke. "You were my best friend, Maddie," Brooke's voice cracked as she screamed, "You were my maid of honor, and you were sleeping with him the whole time." The camera swung around to reveal Haley, her face red, eyes wide with shock and fury. Rachel could see the tears streaking down her cheeks, her mascara running. Haley was yelling, but the words were lost in the noise, drowned out by the chaos around her. The camera zoomed in on Derek, Haley's fiancé, who stood frozen, his hands raised in a feeble attempt to calm the situation. But it was too late. The truth had already erupted. Rachel felt a strange satisfaction, a bittersweet kind of relief. Her family's perfect little world was crumbling. It wasn't just the wedding falling apart, it was the entire facade of perfect harmony they had tried so hard to maintain. They had erased her from the picture, but now they were unraveling on their own. The video played on, showing the scene descending into chaos. Guests were shouting. One woman grabbed her purse, still holding a half-empty glass of wine. Others stood in stunned silence, trying to process the scene unfolding before them. Rachel could feel the sharp edge of vindication, but she wasn't smiling. She didn't feel happy. She didn't feel vengeful. She just watched, knowing that no matter how bad things got, she had already made her exit. For years, she had been the one to clean up their mess. Now, it was their turn to face the consequences. As she watched the video replay itself, she realized she didn't need to be part of this chaos. She had already escaped. The video ended abruptly. No closure. No resolution. Just the sound of Haley's voice, shouting in disbelief. Rachel couldn't help but wonder if Haley was asking herself the same question, how did it all go so wrong? Rachel leaned back in her chair, staring out at the stillness of the lake outside. For the first time, the silence felt like freedom. She had escaped, and now, it seemed, her family was being forced to face their own mess without her. Rachel didn't reach out. She didn't need to. The fallout from Haley's wedding disaster was playing out without her involvement. It was almost as if the absence of Rachel herself was the final twist in a long story of neglect. Her phone didn't stop buzzing. At first, it was Julia checking in on her. Then it was Margaret, her mother, trying to convince Rachel to come back. She left voicemails and sent texts, each one more desperate than the last. Rachel let them pile up, unread. Her hand hovered over the phone each time, but she didn't pick it up. It wasn't that she didn't care. It was that nothing had changed. Her family had never really seen her. Now, they were simply reaching out because they needed her back in the role they had always expected her to play, the fixer, the peacemaker. 3 days after the chaos, Rachel woke up to a message from Haley herself. The text was simple. I know I hurt you. I didn't think it would matter this much. I thought you didn't want to be part of things anymore. Please, I need you. Rachel stared at it for a long time. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't respond. Haley wasn't asking for forgiveness, she was asking for the role Rachel had always played, the one that had allowed the family to move forward while leaving Rachel behind. Rachel's heart wasn't hard, but it had hardened over the years. She had forgiven them so many times, each time convincing herself that things would be different. But they never were. And this time, she wasn't going to be the one to fix everything. Rachel put her phone down and stepped outside. The cool morning air brushed against her skin, and for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. She hadn't been the one to tear the family apart, but she had no intention of being the one to pick up the pieces either. As she stood on the deck, the lake stretching out before her, Rachel realized something. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about freedom. The family would figure it out. Maybe they'd learn. Maybe they wouldn't. But Rachel had already found her answer. She was finally free. Rachel stood on the balcony, watching the fog roll over the lake as the sun began to rise. The world around her was calm, still, a sharp contrast to the chaos she had left behind. The phone was silent, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the weight of it lift from her shoulders. Her family's constant need, their constant expectation that she would fix everything, that she would always be there to clean up their mess, had exhausted her. But now, in this quiet place, she realized that she didn't need to answer their calls, return their texts, or step back into the role they had handed her. She wasn't angry anymore. She had been angry, for a long time, but now, it felt like the anger had dissipated. It was replaced by something different, something more liberating, the realization that she was no longer defined by her family. Rachel didn't need to prove anything to them. She didn't need to beg for their love or their approval. She had spent her whole life doing that, thinking it would make her feel like she belonged. But it hadn't. Instead, all it had done was make her feel small, invisible, and unimportant. The sun finally crested the horizon, casting a soft glow on the water. It was beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, Rachel felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She turned away from the window, walked back inside, and sat down at the small wooden table. No more fighting. No more explanations. Rachel didn't need their validation. She didn't need their forgiveness. She didn't need them. The family might never understand why she had to leave. They might never see what they had done. But it didn't matter anymore. Rachel picked up her pen and wrote a simple letter, one that she knew she would never send. The words were clear, and they were hers. I hope you find peace. I hope you tell the truth. And I hope next time, the invitation comes before the apology. With that, Rachel sealed the letter, knowing that her journey was finally hers to make. Rachel sealed the envelope and slipped it into her bag. She had said everything she needed to say, even if no one would ever hear it. As she walked down the path leading to the town, she passed the small bakery, the same one she had always loved. A simple smile from the baker was all she needed. The phone buzzed again, but this time, Rachel didn't look at it. She didn't need to. Her freedom was no longer in the hands of her family. Rachel had found her peace. And now, she was finally home.